Hello and welcome to our tutorial on the Hello World application for Django for everybody. So I am going to go in excruciating detail how I have this Hello World, how this comes out at drchuck.pythonanywhere.com. And now if you go to this website, you never know what you're going to see because I have lots of Django projects that I can mount up on this URL, and I'll show you how that's all done. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to wake up my Python, just my Python for everywhere, PythonAnywhere dashboard, and walk through a couple of things. So I want to call your attention here to my left-hand side here. So you see that I've got a bash console and a bash console in the virtual environment Django 2. It's probably a good time to review what a virtual environment is. If you go back to your old installing Django on PythonAnywhere, I have this assignment, and if you go back to this assignment, that's PAW_install_MD under the ASSN folder, you had this thing make virtual environment, pip3 install Django, and then work on Django, and then we would do Python 3 -m Django -- version. And at some point it showed you the Django version. And if you recall, this took some bit of a long time. And virtual environments are a way in Python for you to change the overall Python configuration and install things that the owner of this computer has not installed themselves. So, so PythonAnywhere, they installed a version of Python, they may have installed Django, they may or may not have installed Django extensions, etc. And so you want to have more control over what bits of software are actually running in your environment. So instead of using the system-wide Python, you're going to use your own environment, and that's what a virtual environment is. And so this is creating files in your home directory, and if you go in under Files. So I'll go in under the Files tab of PythonAnywhere. If you see it in your home directory, you see .virtualenv, and if you go in, you see one folder called Django 2. And that actually has lots of stuff. You don't want to include, you don't want to mess with this. That virtual env Django 2, .virtualenvs Django 2, that was created by you when you ran make virtual environment, and it downloaded a bunch of stuff. And then in that you could run the pip3 command, which is installing extensions to Python. Now on your laptop, you might be able to just run pip3 normally, and just install more stuff once you have it configured properly. But now we're on a shared system at PythonAnywhere, so we have to do virtual environments. You can do virtual environments in your laptop as well. It's nice if you do it, but it's not essential. Sometimes you can just run pip yourself and have the system-wide Python get all your stuff. But sometimes your laptop can get messed up because systems like Anaconda or Miniconda really confuse your Python, and that's unfortunately because there are so many ways to install and reconfigure Python on your laptop that can get you in trouble. But in this Linux arrangement that we have with PythonAnywhere, it's actually pretty easy. You make a virtual environment, it works pretty good. Now, every time you leave and make a new shell, you have to say work on Django 2, otherwise you've inherited the standard things. And so if I take a look at my dashboard, and you see I've got a bash console, and then I've got a bash console in the virtual environment named Django 2. And so if I click on the bash console alone, you see I don't have the work on the Django 2 prompt. That should be a sign that something's not going to work for you. And what you can do is you can always just say work on Django 2. And that says for the rest of this session, until that bash console goes away, I want to be using the Python that is part of my virtual environment. Now there's a command in Linux called which. So I'm going to say which Python. Well, now it might actually, this one might python3. So you'll see which tells me if I type the command python3, which python3 says, if I type the command python3, where's it going to load that code from? And you see that which python3 is going from the virtual environment, meaning I have installed a copy of Python3 in my home directory, and that's the one I'm using when I type Python3. And that's the essence of how this virtual environment works. So I'm going to log out of this shell. Okay, exit. We'll just exit. Okay, so now if I go back to the dashboard, I should only, so I have this one here. I'm not going to click on the bash console and virtual env yet. I'm just going to start a new console, and that'll start one up, and I won't be in the virtual environment. So that's the key. Every time you start a new one, you see I'm not in the virtual environment because it doesn't say Django. If I type which Python 3, that is my own local copy of Python 3, and I don't quite know how that works, but it's not the system one, but I'm going to guess that is not one that's in my virtual environment. But there's other parts that of the virtual environment that are important. So that just shows you that. I'm going to exit out of here using Control D, and that's going to close this. Now I can go back to my dashboard. Now, there's a really cool thing that you can do to make sure you're always in a virtual environment, and I do this all the time almost without thinking. So I'm going to go under my Web tab in PythonAnywhere, and if you scroll down, one of the things you were supposed to set up is this virtual env area, and I've got that path, the exact home drchuck.virtualenvs Django 2. That's got to be in there, or my online web application is not going to run and start. Okay, but I can also then start a console in that virtual environment, and that's how I created that console. And if I click on this, start a console in the virtual environment, it actually starts it and then does the work on for me automatically, and you see that I've got Django 2 here automatically. And so that means that sort of all my PythonAnywhere stuff works. You'll notice I'm actually properly in the folder for my Django project, and that Django project is the one that's currently mounted into my, I'm going to exit out of here, and so close this, go back to the web tab, and so back to the web tab, there are these variables, source code, working directory, WSGI configuration file. Those are telling the PythonAnywhere which of the Django projects am I really mounting at this point. And we'll talk about these later. These three files allow me to have in my home directory on PythonAnywhere a whole bunch of different projects and let me switch between them. The local library project, the hello project, the DJ free project, the my setup. And so this is how you switch it. Of course, whenever you switch these things, you've got to do the reload, right? So that's sort of my summary of virtual environments. And so I would say, ultimately, don't try to reinstall your virtual environments, right? I would install it once, and chances are good, if you did it right, your virtual environment is not broken. What is most likely broken is the fact that you're not using the virtual environment. So a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to blast this virtual environment, trash it, and try to go all the way back to the install. Sometimes you might have to do that, right? But it kind of confuses your system if you are like running in the virtual environment and you wipe out the virtual environment, you try to remake the virtual environment, and it doesn't work so well. So just in general, once you get the virtual environment set up, leave it alone. Don't try to fix it. It's probably okay. Start a shell, say work on Django 2, and if it doesn't blow up, you're probably okay. Okay, so that's a quick review of what we have with virtual environments. And remember, this is PAW_install_MD is the place where we set that up. But at this point, it's some time ago. Okay? So now that we've done all this, I'm going to go into my web tab, and from previous times I've got this virtual environment. When you switch applications or switch Django projects, you don't switch the virtual environment. That stays the same. That's just giving you Django and Python and all the Python extensions, the Django extensions that we've added. So I'm going to go ahead and start a console. Hopefully I'm not running out of them. I keep exiting them so I don't run out of them. So I'm happy at the point where I've got a bash console and it's in the right folder and it's working in the Django 2 virtual environment. So you see that. I'm working in the Django 2 virtual environment. I'm in /Django_project/first. Now, I'm going to say cd ... to go up a folder. And so this folder is Django projects. If you're using GitHub, this is what you check into GitHub. And so this has all the work I've done so far in this course. I've got my test site, which was the very first assignment, then local library, which was all those whole series of assignments where we're making books and authors and all that stuff, and that code's all sitting here in local library. My folder's called Django projects because each one of these is a different Django project. Checklist is something we're going to build later. DJ for E is what you're building, hopefully, about right now. But I didn't name it because I had this thing called first, which is, I should probably call this the beginning. But first is this application that you're building from scratch at this point in this kind of DIY hello world. So first, I made first by using a Django admin start app, and let's go to that, the hello world page. Hello world. So, right, Django admin start projects DJ for E. That's going to make a subfolder within Django projects. You got to say work on Django 2 if you need it. But if Django 2 is already showing in your prompt, and you don't have to keep saying that over and over again. And then you're going to start an application within that. So I've gone down one folder into Django projects DJ for E. I ran Python3 manage.py start app home. And so if I take a look at the folders, I've got database. I've got first folder, which is the name for the Django project. That's where settings.py and urls.py for the entire project. And then I have one application called home, and we'll talk about that in a second. And that is the sort of first application. And home is actually where the template that renders hello world is going to be shown. And so that's all good. And so I'm in project first, and I've done this other than I didn't name it DJ for E, I named it project first. Okay, now I say how to start Django new project if you're on a local computer. You're not on a local computer, you are in PythonAnywhere. So let's take a look at some of the files and the important things. And again, the instructions tell you how to edit these files. Or let's just file the outline of the homework assignment. So let's go into, I'm going to open this in a new window, the Web tab. Now, the Web tab is really cool. There's a reload, although you'll see that there's little reload buttons all over the place. If there's a little reload, there's not one here. I wish there was in the console, but there isn't. But reloading it is when you make changes, okay? So the key thing here is this code section. And there's source code, working directory, WSGI configuration file. Again, I said don't change virtual envs. And then there's this error log down here under log files, Dr. Chuck PythonAnywhere.com error log. If you get the dreaded something went wrong with a smiley face, then you have to go look in this error log and scroll all the way to the bottom. But back to code and source code. So the working directory and source code are two of the three things you have to switch when you're going from one project to the other. And that is just the full path of the source code directory and the working directory. Working directory tells it how to find the db.sqlite file, right? So that is the file. And there's going to be many db.sqlite files under Django projects, one for each of the Django projects that I build. And that's where migrations, and so in every folder under Django projects, there is, here, let me go, cd ... I'm going to say ls-l star, that means in all folders, /db.sqlite3. And you see that there are a number of db.sqlite3s. And so it's important in the web app setup, I'll go back into first, cd first. It's important in the web app setup that you tell it where to go to get the db.sqlite3 file. You just edit this and you change it. Now, pretty much all this is the same, except the last part where it says first, and then you're going to change that. Now, you'll notice the path to the WSGI configuration file is not in your home folder at all. And so you just have to edit this. This is kind of in the system far, far outside your control, but it is the way that you tell the Django starter upper code that's part of PythonAnywhere how to start your code up. And so here you generally have to get this path right, the OS path expand user tilde, which is my home directory, /Django project /first. That basically is the path to the Django project. And then you have to say first.settings. That has to do with the fact that this is the first module gets imported, and that's a object within the first module rather than a file path. So that's not really a file path, that is a module. Whereas that is a file path. And so you can switch back and forth, right? You can switch back and forth between many projects by changing those. There's two things you got to change here. You don't have to retype all this. You just change those two things. The word first, maybe it's local library, maybe it's my test app, who knows, but it's a way you change it. And then you go back to web tab, you change that file, the WSGI configuration file, and then you change the source code and you change the working directory, leave virtual environments alone, and then reload your application, and then you should see your application. Finish reloading, and here we are, drchuck, PythonAnywhere.com, hello world. So I've showed you how Python Anywhere and virtual environments work, which is sort of like the outer wrapping of your application. And now I'll just sort of show your application. Now, this all is described in the section under djfree_hello.md. Change the source code, change the, your virtual environment should already be pointing, right? And then you gotta, I tell you to change these things, your name is not first, right? So your DJ, everything, or I'm using first, you're using DJ free. And then I tell you to make some folders. So home is the first application. Underneath it, you're gonna put more in here. So you got to make the folder for templates, and folder for templates and templates home. The command to do that. So I'm in first, make dir home/templates. This is going to fail because it's already there. Yay! And then you got to add it again. Home templates home. Got to make that folder. So that you've got to do. I'll change that to put those instructions in. And then you got to create the file. Come back. Home/templates/home. So you got to put some HTML in. I'm going to put it in hello.html. And I say hello world. That's it. So I've got it. Okay, so I'm in hello world. Now you may have to put some more stuff in here, but that is the text that is this. Now, let's talk about how it all gets to work. Now, you've got to change the settings file, and in yours will be DJ free. Mine is first settings.py. I'm going to edit that. So there's a few things to look at here in this file. Oops. So some mistakes I've seen students do is this debug, you want it true. They're telling you to turn it to false if you're in production, but you're not really in production. You're writing your code. When you're developing, you want debug turned on, and that has to do with the fact that it gives you more detail when you make errors. Otherwise, it's very cryptic about your detail. So a lot of students will come in, I can't figure out what's wrong with my thing because it just says error. Well, that's because you have debug to false. Now, reading this comment, it's really quite reasonable, so I just remind you over and over, do not set it to false, otherwise you will have great difficulty dealing with your application. You have allowed hosts, which basically says who can hit this application, and you want basically anybody, that's anybody on the internet to hit it. Okay, so we have the apps here that we want, and so those are the things that you've got to do. Get debug right, get allowed host right, and get the apps right. Okay? So that's that file. Then you've got to edit the file first, or DJ free in your case, urls.py. And this, you'll put the admin and the home URLs so that you can eventually do the admin. The admin is less important in this particular first application, but you're going to need it soon enough, so we might as well just put it in. And then include the URLs from the home application within the first project. Okay, and then if we take a look in the home folder, pi home/urls.py, so here I just am going to import a template view, and then I'm going to basically route slash, so it's basically routing. The global URL routes the no path into, come back, global URL routes no path. There's like nothing here, right? There's nothing blah blah blah, there's nothing after it, right, slash this. So it's like there's nothing on the URL. That gets routed into home.urls, and then I'm routing nothing within home.urls into just the template home/hello.html, and I'm giving it a name for no particular reason. Okay? And so those files, the first settings.py, the first urls.py, home urls.py, and the home templates home hello.html, those are the files that you've got to create. And then you go to your web tab and you make sure that your code section has pointing to the right folder, both source code and working directory. Your WSGI configuration has been edited to point to the right folder, and then load up the project-wide settings. And then I think I can hit back here, yeah. And then make sure your virtual environment is right. Don't keep changing this, okay? And at that point, you should be able to reload your application. Visit your URL, and it should talk. And if it fails, if you don't get that and it sends the little funky message, well, let's just do this. Let's just cause the message. So I'm going to come in here in this WSGI configuration file, and I'm going to mess it up. Okay, and I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to go back to the web tab, and then I'm going to reload it. And if this goes well, something went wrong. Now everyone looks at this and they go like, oh, let's run and get help. It's telling you what to do. You look here in this error log first. I'm going to open it in a new window, Dr. Chuck, PythonAnywhere.com error log, and then scroll all the way to the bottom. Now the weird thing here is all of your errors that you've done, right, are in here. So you got to get all the way down, right? And you got to look at the bottom, and you can even look at the times of these things. And it's a traceback, so just like in any Python, there's a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with you. But look at this one. Module not found error. No module named XYZZY. Error running WSGI application, right? And, I just forced an error, right? And sometimes you can look in the server log to see it. If there's nothing that seems like it might be a suspect, you can check the server log. But the error log is mostly where you do this. So let me go fix that now. I made a mistake here, and I've got to change this to be first, XYZZY to first in the WSGI configuration, and then first again in the WSGI configuration, and then I save the file. Then I reload the application. This is up here in the file editing. I reload the application, and if all goes well, I should be able to reload it. So I hope this was helpful. It's a bit long. I wanted to just remind you of a whole bunch of things that can cause your application to go wrong. Part of the reason we're doing all this is so that your application can go right, but you've been working on the same application, and I want to get you focused on what it takes to build a new application and get that application running. Cheers.